This is Land of Havilah, 2 Chronicles 12. In the last chapter, Rehoboam listened to Shemaiah the prophet and abandoned the idea of reconquering Israel. He fortified 15 of his own cities, and for 3 years he prospered. Then, verse 1. When the kingdom of Rehoboam was established and he was strong, he abandoned Yahweh's law and all Israel with him. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem because they had trespassed against Yahweh, with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen. The people were without number who came with him out of Egypt, the Lubim, the Sukkim, and the Ethiopians. He took the fortified cities which belonged to Judah and came to Jerusalem. Now Shemaiah the prophet came to Rehoboam and to the princes of Judah who were gathered together to Jerusalem because of Shishak, and said to them, Yahweh says, You've forsaken me, therefore I've also left you in the hand of Shishak. Then the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves, and they said, Yahweh's righteous. When Yahweh saw that they humbled themselves, Yahweh's word came to Shemaiah, saying, They've humbled themselves. I'll not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance, and my wrath won't be poured out on Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless, they will be his servants, that they may know my service, and the service of the kingdoms of the countries. So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem and took away the treasures of Yahweh's house and the treasures of the king's house. He took it all away. He also took away the shields of gold which Solomon had made. King Rehoboam made shields of brass in their place and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guard, who kept the door of the king's house. As often as the king entered into Yahweh's house, the guard came and bore them, then brought them back into the guard room. When he humbled himself, Yahweh's wrath turned from him, so as not to destroy him altogether. Moreover, there were good things found in Judah. Comment: Rehoboam did right the first few years, but in verse 1, once he felt confident and secure in his kingdom, he and all the country abandoned Yahweh. When things are going well, let's not develop a false sense of confidence and abandon God. There's no detail here about their sin, but coming up in chapters 14 and 15, there will be some backfill that the people had built altars and erected monuments to foreign gods on high places, meaning on tops of hills and mountains. Their gods included Asherah and images of the sun. And there was no teaching priest. They weren't learning Yahweh's word, which sounds much the same as today, that most people don't know his word. Therefore, there's much evil. In verses 3 and 4, Shishak, king of Egypt, invaded with a very large multinational army, including Ethiopians, Lubim, which are Libyans, and Sukkim, which are unknown. They captured all the fortified cities of Judah and arrived at Jerusalem. Rehoboam and the elders of Judah were inside helpless and thinking about their impending annihilation. In verse 5, Shemaiah the prophet delivered the word of Yahweh to them, which was, quote, You have forsaken me, therefore I have also left you in the hand of Shishak, end quote. At this, Rehoboam and all the elders of Judah humbled themselves before Yahweh. In verse 6, they said, Yahweh is righteous, meaning it's only right that he sent this trouble on us. In verses 7 through 12, Yahweh was moved by their humility, and thanks to Yahweh's mercy, Shishak didn't destroy Jerusalem or kill anyone we know of. He only plundered them and put them to service, meaning from there out Rehoboam was subservient to Shishak and paid tribute to him. In verse 9, Shishak took all the massive wealth that Israel had accumulated in the days of Samuel, David, and Solomon, all of it gone in one invasion. There's no mention of whether Shishak entered the glorious temple and stripped it, but he did take what was in the temple treasury and the king's treasures, including the gold shields. Verses 9 through 11 give us the best clue of the meaning and function of the gold shields. As we said before, they were symbols of wealth and glory, but more particularly, the king's honor guard took them up and displayed them whenever the king went in and out of the temple. Of course, this was to honor the king and wow the public. From the time Shishak invaded, Rehoboam had to suffer the insult of his honor guard using bronze shields. In verse 12, it wasn't all bad in Judah. Quote, There were good things found in Judah, end quote. It's not clear whether Yahweh found good things or the people found that life wasn't totally bad. So Shishak invaded, put them to service, and left. Now verse 13. So King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem and reigned, For Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. He did that which was evil because he didn't set his heart to seek Yahweh. Now the acts of Rehoboam, first and last, aren't they written in the histories of Shemaiah the prophet and of Iddo the seer in the genealogies? There were wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried in David's city, and Abijah his son reigned in his place. Comment in verse 13, Rehoboam strengthened himself and reigned. There'll be no more mention of service to Shishak of Egypt, but we don't know how Judah regained her independence because there's no detail of it. Rehoboam's father, Solomon, had 700 wives and 300 concubines. His foreign women turned his heart to their foreign gods, 1 Kings 11. In verse 13, we find out for the first time in the Chronicles that Rehoboam's mother was a foreigner, Naamah the Ammonitess, and it could be she was one of the wives that so negatively influenced Solomon, and maybe she also negatively influenced Rehoboam. But however it came to be, the summation of Rehoboam in verse 14 was that, quote, he did that which was evil, end quote. Also in verse 14, quote, he didn't set his heart to seek Yahweh, end quote. So it's our responsibility to set our hearts to seek him. In the last chapter, Rehoboam had 18 wives and 28 sons. Of all those sons and wives, he named Abijah his son his successor. Why him? He was son of his beloved wife Maacah. In verse 16, we just read, Rehoboam died, and as planned, Abijah took his place. Abijah will be fourth of 21 kings of the house of David. In verse 15, Rehoboam warred continually with Jeroboam, but there's no detail. Maybe it was just a continual cold war or some minor border skirmishes. You can find the chapters quickly at landofhavilah.net, or if you're on YouTube, you can follow the playlist there. 2 Chronicles 13 is next.